I've got a new app. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I found it whilst watching Clarkson's Farm, if anyone's seen that. And it's amazing. What it does is, when I open it up and I'm in my garden and I'm listening, it tells me all of the birds and the sounds that they're making right there. So the bird's making the noise, and I can have a look on my phone, and it will say, that's a wren. And I'll go, oh, brilliant. And I'll tell my children, and they won't be very interested. But that's what happens. And it's actually quite cool. It's quite cool. And my eyes have opened, really, to how many birds are in our garden. They were obviously there before. The app didn't make them appear there. But my eyes are open to the fact that they're there now, and I can see and I can recognize them, and I can pretend I'm really cool to anyone that comes over and tell them all about the birds in our garden, which I'm realizing is not actually particularly cool. Anyway, I like it. I like it. Let me tell you something about myself. Before I did what I do now, before I was ordained, before I stepped into ministry, I worked in an office. I worked in finance, and it was very long, could be quite boring, could be quite exciting, but there were days, and plenty of days, where I would get to work, I'd be at work, I'd come home from work, and I would realize, it would land with me that I have not thought about God once. Today, I have not prayed. I have not considered God. I have just gone about my day. I've done my emails. I've cycled in. I've done this, that, and the other. I've come home, and suddenly I've gone, oh my goodness, I have not thought about God once. There'd be that drop in my stomach. Because we know the people, don't we, who are like the other end of the swirly spectrum, for whom we'll be prophesying about what breakfast cereals they're going to have. And you ask them how their day's been, and they'll come out with a psalm. And that's very lovely. The prayer just bubbles out of them. They've always got a prayer for you, and it's wonderful. They talk about God like they've just come off the phone with him. And I'm not being snide, I love those people. There are a number of those people in this church, and they are fantastic. If you are that person, the church is better for you being here. But if you're anything like me, you can look at them and make a conclusion about yourself. And that the conclusion is that hearing God, or walking step by step with God, is actually maybe for a certain sort of person, a certain type of person. And I'm not one of them. A belief's easy to hold. We can even call it humble, can't we, if we really try to squeeze into it. But quietly, it's slowly a little bit poisonous, I think, because the moment you believe it, the moment you stop expecting anything, you stop listening, not out of rebellion, just out of kind of distraction and embarrassment, don't you? So this morning, I want to take you on the road. I want to take you on the road with the two people here who were not having a wonderful spiritual day, that had a terrible day. They'd packed it in and they'd gone home. And that's exactly in our story where Jesus shows up, where Jesus turns up. So it's the Sunday after the worst day of their lives. They have just had their friend, more than their friend, their mentor, the one they loved, the one they had pinned their hopes on. He had been killed. He had been publicly disgraced and humiliated, and now he was gone. Everything they had given up, their whole lives, they had switched everything, changed everything, and now it seemed like it was for nothing. And they're walking home to Emmaus. And they say these words amidst all of that we read this morning. These three words really stood out to me as we're reading through. And they said, we had hoped. We had hoped. Can you hear the sadness and the giving in from that? Past tense, we used to. Some of you will know the experience of a hope not realized, of something you had longed for, prayed for, hoped for, that did not happen. We read this in verse 15. Jesus himself came up and walked alongside them. Let's not rush past the words there. Who moves first? Who moves first? It's not them. They weren't out looking for Jesus. They weren't searching for him. At the sounds that he wasn't in his tomb, they hadn't gone on a Jesus hunt. They'd given up and were walking away. But he comes to them. He doesn't wait back in Jerusalem for them to pull themselves together. He doesn't wait for them to get their faith back and all of their stuff together. He comes out into the ordinary road and starts walking. And they haven't got the faintest idea who he is. They walk 7 miles next to the risen Jesus. They have no idea who he is. And if you look carefully, the Bible says this. It doesn't say they were being slow. It doesn't say that they weren't looking. It says this: they were kept from recognizing him. They were kept from recognizing him. That's someone else doing something. That's not them. You know, it wasn't their failure. It wasn't a test that they'd flunked. This is kind of a bit of what God is so often like, I think. We look at how much of the Bible is God just working away slowly in the everyday. You know, Jesus himself spending 30 years as a carpenter in an ordinary town, doing an ordinary job. The neighbors just knew him as the son of someone they know. 30 years and nobody noticed. That's not God being distant. That is still God with us. That's his normal working method. He is almost always at work long before anyone can see it. So if that's what he's like, then the phrase, "I can't see anything happening," and "nothing is happening," are two completely different sentences for us. I want to say that as plainly as I can, because I think some of us have been carrying the other idea around for years, that if we're not hearing from God, if we don't see God in the everyday, in all that we do, we think it must be because we are maybe bad at this, or he's not happy with us, or there's something missing that we're not doing. And that is not what's going on in this story. Some of you might be walking a stretch of road right now where God seems to have gone quiet. Or you would tell me that nothing's happening, or he's not speaking to you. And I'm not going to stand here and pretend I explain what's happening, but I would point you to these two who are walking this road, because they would have told you the same thing. They would have said, "Where is God? He has gone. Where is Jesus? He has gone." But he was right there the whole way. It says, then their eyes were opened. They get to the village. It is getting dark. And he acts as if he's carrying on further. He never barges in. Have you noticed that? He never barges in. But they invite him in. Something about him, something about talking with Jesus, something about turning towards him before we even feel anything is so compelling that it draws us to him. They say, "Stay with us." So he does, and he sits at the ordinary table and has an ordinary dinner at the end of a long day of walking. And he picks up the bread, he breaks it in the way that Jesus did. And then their eyes were opened and they recognized him. There it is again. Their eyes were opened. It's not saying they finally worked it out. It's not saying in the midst of a tricky situation, in the midst of the feeling that God was absent, they worked their way back into his good books. They found him. It's not like an open book of Where's Wally, and they finally found him. Their eyes were open. It was given to them, just like the app, my app on my phone. I didn't get better at listening to birds. I didn't suddenly know how to identify bird calls. I got given something that told me what was already there, that pointed me in the direction of what was happening, the things that I didn't already know. And this is the bit that I can't get away from. They turn to each other and say, "Were not our hearts burning within us as he talked with us on the road. Not here at the table, but back there, hours ago, miles ago, when they were still confused, when they still thought he was a stranger with them, when they'd have told you that nothing whatsoever was happening. Their hearts were already burning. They just didn't know what it was yet. It's like one of those films where you get to the end and there's a big change, a big hinge shift. Nothing in the film changes, but you want to go and watch it again because it's all changed, the way you look at it. That's the road to Emmaus. Let me come back to the garden. I didn't put the birds in my garden. They were there way before I got there. They'd been there all year since I've been living in our house. I didn't get any better at hearing them. I was just given something that told me what was already there. And I'd love to teach you a prayer this morning, teach you a prayer that I find helpful. And the prayer isn't this. The prayer isn't, God, please start speaking to me. The prayer is this. You may want to pray this on your way home, as you get ready for bed, as you brush your teeth. God, show me where you were today. God, show me where you were today.